I was sitting in my truck at 4:30 in the morning, waiting for the coffee to kick in, when I saw the flashing red and blue lights pull up behind me. My first thought was that someone had reported a suspicious vehicle, which happened occasionally when people did not recognize my plow truck parked on their street. What I did not expect was for this to turn into the most ridiculous confrontation I had experienced in my 10 years running a snowplow business in Traverse City, Michigan. The officer approached my window, and I rolled it down, letting in a blast of cold January air. "Morning, officer," I said, trying to sound more awake than I felt. "Good morning. License and registration, please." He was young, probably fresh out of the academy, and he looked uncomfortable. I handed over my documents. "Is there a problem?" He glanced at my paperwork, then back at me. "We received a complaint about unauthorized snow removal operations in the Riverside Meadows subdivision. Are you Yannick Morrison?" "That's me. I have been plowing this neighborhood for 3 years now. I have contracts with about 15 homeowners here." The officer shifted his weight. "The complaint came from the Homeowners Association. They are saying you do not have permission to operate a commercial vehicle in the subdivision." I felt my jaw tighten. "I have been plowing these driveways since 2023. Nobody said anything before." "I understand, sir, but I need to ask you to cease operations until this gets sorted out with the HOA. He handed back my license and registration. "I am not writing you a citation, but if we get called out here again, I might have to." I wanted to argue, but I could see he was just doing his job. "Who filed the complaint?" He checked his notes. "A Barbara Kensington. She is listed as the HOA president, of course. I had heard that name before. She had moved into the subdivision about 6 months ago and immediately got herself elected HOA president by actually showing up to the meetings that most residents ignored. I had never met her personally, but several of my clients had mentioned she was making waves with new rules and regulations. "Look," I said, "I appreciate you coming out here, but I have contracts with these homeowners. They pay me to plow their driveways. The HOA does not have anything to do with it." The officer shrugged. "That might be true, but I cannot let you continue if there is an active complaint. You will need to work it out with the HOA." After he left, I sat there for a few minutes, debating my options. I had 5 more driveways to plow in this neighborhood, and it had snowed 8 inches overnight. My clients were counting on me. But I also did not want to get arrested for trespassing, or whatever ridiculous charge this Barbara person might dream up. I pulled out my phone and called my first client of the morning, an elderly man named Robert Chen, who had been using my services since I started the business. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Yannick, everything okay?" "Hey, Robert, sorry to wake you, but I just got stopped by the police. The HOA president filed a complaint about my plowing operations. They are telling me I cannot work in the subdivision." There was a long pause. "That is ridiculous. I pay you to plow my driveway. What does the HOA have to do with it?" "That is what I said, but the officer told me to work it out with Barbara Kensington before I continue." "Barbara," Robert sighed heavily. "She has been a nightmare since she moved in. Last month, she tried to fine me $200 because my trash cans were visible from the street for more than 12 hours. I had surgery and could not bring them in right away. Seriously, dead serious. Half the neighborhood cannot stand her, but nobody wants to deal with the drama of challenging her. Let me make some calls. I know a few other people who use your service. Maybe if we all push back together, she will back down." "I appreciate that, Robert. In the meantime, I need to figure out what to do about the rest of my route this morning." After hanging up, I pulled up my contract list. I had 43 residential clients spread across Traverse City and another dozen commercial properties. Riverside Meadows made up about a third of my residential business, and I could not afford to lose them. But more than that, I genuinely liked my clients here. They were good people who had supported me when I was just starting out. I decided to finish my route in the other neighborhoods and then deal with the HOA situation later in the day. By the time I completed my last plow job, it was nearly noon and I was exhausted. Plowing snow might look simple, but after 8 hours in a truck, navigating tight driveways and dealing with poorly parked cars, every muscle in my body ached. I grabbed lunch at a diner on Front Street, and while I was eating, my phone started blowing up with messages. Robert had apparently rallied the troops, and my Riverside Meadows clients were furious about the HOA interference. Several of them had already contacted Barbara directly, and from what I could gather from the texts, she was not backing down. One message from a client named Jennifer Walsh included a screenshot of an email Barbara had sent to the entire subdivision. I zoomed in to read it. Dear Riverside Meadows residents, it has come to my attention that several homeowners have hired an unauthorized commercial snow removal service. Per Section 7.3 of our HOA bylaws, all commercial vehicles operating within the subdivision must be approved by the board. This includes lawn care, snow removal, and any other service requiring large trucks or equipment. The board has not approved this particular contractor, and his operations create noise disturbances during early morning hours and contribute to accelerated road deterioration. Effective immediately, any homeowner using this unapproved service will be subject to a fine of $250 per occurrence. The board is currently soliciting bids from approved vendors who will provide snow removal services at competitive rates. More information will follow soon. Thank you for your cooperation in keeping our community beautiful and well-maintained. Respectfully, Barbara Kensington, HOA President. I read the email 3 times, my anger building with each pass. Everything about it was designed to paint me as some kind of reckless operator who was damaging their precious neighborhood. The bit about noise disturbances was particularly rich considering I went out of my way to use equipment with sound dampening specifically to avoid bothering people during early morning runs. But what really got me was the implication that I was somehow not qualified or professional. I had built my business from nothing, invested in top-tier equipment, carried comprehensive insurance, and maintained an impeccable safety record. I had more certifications and training than probably any other snowplow operator in the county, and that gave me an idea. See, what Barbara did not know was that in addition to my residential and commercial clients, I also had a contract with the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Department. 3 years ago, I had bid on and won a contract to provide emergency snow removal services for county facilities, including the sheriff's office parking lots, the county courthouse, and several satellite offices. It was not my biggest money maker, but it was steady work, and it had given me connections throughout local law enforcement. I pulled up the contact information for Sheriff Mark Davidson. We had developed a friendly relationship over the years, mostly through casual conversations when I was plowing the department's lots. He was a practical, no-nonsense guy who appreciated reliability, and I had never missed a shift or done subpar work. I called his direct line, not really expecting him to answer in the middle of the day, but he picked up after 2 rings. Sheriff Davidson. Hey, Sheriff, this is Yannick Morrison. I handle your snow removal. Yannick, how are you doing? You keeping busy with all this snow? Actually, that is why I am calling. I ran into a weird situation this morning, and I am hoping you might have some insight. I explained what had happened with the HOA, the police response, and Barbara's threatening email. To my surprise, Sheriff Davidson started laughing. "Let me guess, Riverside Meadows." "Yeah, how did you know?" "Because we have gotten about a dozen calls from that subdivision in the past 6 months, all related to their HOA president. She called us last month because someone parked an RV in their driveway. Wanted us to impound it as an abandoned vehicle. When we explained that people are allowed to park RVs on their own property, she threatened to file a complaint with the county commissioners. Sounds like she is making friends everywhere." "Listen, Yannick, I cannot get directly involved in a civil HOA dispute, but I can tell you that if you have legal contracts with homeowners and you are not actually violating any laws, the HOA cannot prevent you from working. They might be able to fine their residents, but they cannot bar you from private property if the owner invites you." That is what I figured, but the officer this morning told me to stop. "Who responded to the call?" "Young guy, I did not catch his name. Probably Officer Stevens. He is new. I will have a word with him about understanding the limits of HOA authority. In the meantime, I would suggest documenting everything and maybe talking to a lawyer if this escalates." "I appreciate the advice, Sheriff." "No problem. And hey, since I've got you on the phone, any chance you can do an extra pass through our back lot this afternoon? We have got a couple of vehicles stuck back there." "Already on my schedule. I will be there around 3. After hanging up, I felt a bit better. At least I knew I was not crazy for thinking the HOA was overstepping. But I still needed to figure out my next move. Hiring a lawyer would cost money I would rather not spend, especially in the slow season. And while I could probably fight this and win eventually, I would lose income and clients in the meantime. I decided to try the direct approach first. I looked up the contact information for Barbara Kensington and found a phone number listed on the HOA website. I called it, half expecting to get voicemail, but she answered immediately. "Barbara Kensington speaking." "Miss Kensington, this is Yannick Morrison. I run the Snowplow service that several residents in Riverside Meadows use. I wanted to talk to you about the complaint you filed this morning." There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was cold and clipped. "Mr. Morrison, I have nothing to discuss with you. You are operating an unauthorized commercial business in our subdivision, and that is a clear violation of our bylaws. With all due respect, I am not operating a business in your subdivision. I am providing a service to individual homeowners who have invited me onto their private property. That is not the same thing. Our bylaws state that all commercial vehicles must be approved by the board. Your truck is commercial and you are not approved. It is quite simple." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "Miss Kensington, I have been providing this service for 3 years without any issues. Why is this suddenly a problem?" "Because I actually read the bylaws and enforce them, unlike the previous board. Our community has standards, Mr. Morrison, and we intend to maintain them. I carry full insurance. I use professional-grade equipment, and I have never damaged any property or caused any problems." "What exactly is your concern?" "My concern is that you are undermining the authority of this HOA. We are in the process of establishing contracts with approved vendors who will provide services to the entire community at negotiated rates. Your little independent operation interferes with that plan." And there it was. This was not about bylaws or community standards. Barbara wanted to control the snow removal contracts, probably getting kickbacks or favors from whatever vendor she planned to approve. I had seen this kind of thing before in other HOAs, little empires built on petty corruption. "So this is about money," I said flatly. "This is about proper community management, Now, if you continue to operate in Riverside Meadows, I will have no choice but to take legal action. Good day, Mr. Morrison. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my truck, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. This woman had essentially admitted she was trying to push me out so she could install her own preferred vendor. My clients would end up paying more for worse service, and I would lose a significant portion of my income. I called Robert Chen back and filled him in on the conversation. I knew it, he said. She has been angling to get kickbacks from service providers since day one. She tried the same thing with lawn care last summer. Told everyone we had to use her approved company, which charged double what we were paying before. What happened with that? A few people complained to the county, and it turned out her approved company was owned by her brother-in-law. There was a whole investigation, but it went nowhere because technically she had not broken any laws. She just made life miserable for anyone who did not comply. She is fining you guys $250 per occurrence if you use my service. Robert was quiet for a moment. Most people here cannot afford that, Yannick. I am retired, living on a fixed income. I am sorry, but if she actually enforces those fines, I might not be able to keep using you. I understand, Robert. I am not going to put you in a bad position. What are you going to do? I do not know yet. But I am not going to let her bully me out of business. Over the next few days, I continued plowing my routes in other neighborhoods while I figured out my strategy. Several of my Riverside Meadows clients reluctantly told me they had to cancel their contracts because they could not afford the HOA fines. I lost 8 clients in 3 days, which translated to about $1,500 a month in lost revenue. But a few of my clients, including Robert, Jennifer Walsh, and a guy named Tom Foster who owned a construction company, refused to back down. They told Barbara she could try to fine them, but they would fight it. Jennifer even started organizing other residents to challenge Barbara's authority at the next HOA meeting. Meanwhile, I kept thinking about what Sheriff Davidson had said about documenting everything. I started keeping detailed records of all my interactions with the HOA, saving emails, recording dates and times of phone calls, and taking photos of my work in the subdivision to prove I was not damaging anything. I also did some research into HOA law in Michigan. It turned out that while HOAs had broad authority over common areas and architectural standards, their power over individual homeowner choices was more limited. They could not, for example, prevent you from having guests or hiring contractors to work on your property. The key question was whether snow removal counted as a contractor service or something else. I found a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes, a woman named Patricia Stone, who had a reputation for taking on overreaching boards. I scheduled a consultation, expecting to pay a fortune, but she only charged me $50 for an hour of her time. "This is pretty straightforward," she said after I explained the situation. The HOA can create rules about commercial vehicles parking in the subdivision overnight or using common area roads in ways that damage them, but they cannot prevent homeowners from hiring whatever service provider they want. That would be an illegal restraint of trade. So I am in the clear. Legally, yes. Practically, it is more complicated. The HOA can make things difficult for your clients through fines and harassment. If you want to fight this properly, you would need to file a lawsuit seeking an injunction against the HOA and possibly countersue for tortious interference with your business relationships. How much would that cost? Probably $5,000 to $10,000, depending on how long it drags out. Maybe more if it goes to trial. I winced. That was money I did not have sitting around, especially after losing clients. "Is there any other option?" I asked, Patricia leaned back in her chair, thinking, "You could try going to the media." Local news loves David versus Goliath stories, especially when it involves an overbearing HOA. Sometimes public pressure is more effective than legal action. Would that not make things worse? It might. But it might also make Barbara back down if she realizes she is on the wrong side of public opinion. And honestly, from what you have told me, she is probably violating a few laws herself with this kickback scheme. If that got exposed, the whole thing might collapse. I left Patricia's office with a lot to think about. Going to the media felt like escalating the conflict, but maybe that was necessary. Barbara had already escalated by getting the police involved and threatening my clients. That evening, I was plowing the sheriff's department parking lot when Sheriff Davidson came out to chat. It was just after 6, and the snow was coming down hard again. "Yannick, you got a minute?" he called from the door. I finished my pass and pulled up next to him. "What is up, Sheriff?" "I heard from a few people that the HOA situation in Riverside Meadows is getting worse." "That true?" "Yeah, I have lost about half my clients there because they are scared of the fines. The HOA president is basically trying to force everyone to use her preferred vendor." Sheriff Davidson shook his head. "I hate this kind of thing. People get a little power and suddenly they think they are royalty." He paused, seeming to consider something. "You know, I have been meaning to talk to you about expanding your contract with the county." "Oh yeah." "We have been getting complaints about snow removal on some of the rural county roads. The state handles the main highways, but we are responsible for secondary roads, and our current contractor is not keeping up. Would you be interested in bidding on that work?" I felt my pulse quicken. County road contracts were serious business, the kind of steady, reliable income that could sustain a company through lean times. "Absolutely. What kind of mileage are we talking about?" "About 80 miles of road, mostly in the areas around Kingsley and Grawn. It would require some overnight shifts during heavy snow, and you would need to be on call. But the pay is good, and it is a 3-year contract." "I am definitely interested." "Good. I will have our county administrator send you the bid documents. Just get them back to us by the end of the month." As I drove home that night, I felt a surge of optimism. If I could land that county contract, losing the Riverside Meadows clients would not hurt as much. It might even be a blessing in disguise, pushing me toward bigger and better opportunities. But I still could not let Barbara get away with her bullying. It was not just about me anymore. It was about the principle of the thing and about my clients who were being harassed for making their own choices. The next morning, I contacted a reporter at the Traverse City Record Eagle named Sarah Mitchell. I had met her a few years ago when she did a feature on small businesses surviving harsh winters. I explained the situation with the HOA, and she immediately perked up. "This is exactly the kind of story our readers love," she said. "Can I interview you and a few of your clients?" "Yeah, I will set it up." Over the next few days, Sarah interviewed me, Robert Chen, Jennifer Walsh, and Tom Foster. She also reached out to Barbara Kensington for comment, which apparently did not go well. According to Sarah, Barbara had threatened to sue the newspaper for harassment and slammed the phone down. The article ran on a Wednesday front page of the local news section. The headline read, "Local snowplow operator faces HOA interference despite contract with county." It was fair and balanced, presenting both sides of the issue, but the facts spoke for themselves. The article included information about Barbara's previous controversies in the subdivision and raised questions about her planned vendor contracts. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By noon, the article had been shared hundreds of times on social media. Local residents who had dealt with difficult HOAs started sharing their own stories in the comments. A few people even started a Facebook group called Traverse City HOA Accountability to document problems with overreaching boards. More importantly, several members of the Riverside Meadows HOA board reached out to me directly. It turned out that Barbara had made most of her decisions unilaterally, without consulting the other board members. One of them, a retired accountant named Greg Patterson, told me that he had never even seen the complaint Barbara filed against me. "This is completely out of line," Greg said when we met for coffee. "The board is supposed to vote on major decisions like this. Barbara has been acting like a dictator, and frankly, a lot of us are sick of it. Can you do anything about it? We are calling for an emergency board meeting this Saturday. I cannot promise anything, but I think we have the votes to overturn her decision about your snowplow service." The emergency meeting was held in the subdivision's community center, and nearly 100 residents showed up, which was apparently unprecedented for Riverside Meadows. I attended as a guest of Robert Chen, sitting in the back and trying to stay out of the way. Barbara opened the meeting looking furious. She kept trying to control the agenda, but residents kept interrupting with questions and complaints. Jennifer Walsh stood up and presented a petition signed by 63 homeowners calling for the board to rescind the commercial vehicle restrictions. "This is out of order," Barbara snapped. "We are not here to debate board policy." "Actually, we are," Greg Patterson said. "I am making a motion to suspend the commercial vehicle approval requirement pending a full review of its legality and impact on homeowner rights." Another board member, a woman named Linda Torres, immediately seconded the motion. Barbara's face turned red. "You cannot do this. I am the president of this board." "And we are the other members of this board," Greg said calmly. All in favor of the motion, 4 hands went up. Only Barbara voted against it. "Motion passes," Greg announced. "Mr. Morrison, you are free to continue your snow removal services in Riverside Meadows." The room erupted in applause. I saw several of my former clients smiling and giving me thumbs up. Barbara grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting without another word. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got a call from the Traverse City Police Department. This time, it was not a patrol officer, but a detective named Mark Russo. "Mr. Morrison, I need to ask you some questions about your snowplow operations." My stomach dropped. "What is this about?" "We received a complaint that you have been trespassing in Riverside Meadows and damaging private property." The complainant provided photos of tire tracks on a lawn that she claims were caused by your vehicle. "That is ridiculous. I have never damaged anyone's property." "I am sure this is just a misunderstanding, but I need to investigate. Can you come down to the station?" I called Patricia Stone before heading to the police station, and she agreed to meet me there. When we arrived, Detective Russo showed us photos that Barbara had submitted. They showed deep tire ruts in what appeared to be someone's front yard, cutting across the snow-covered grass. "Do you recognize this property?" Russo asked. I studied the photo carefully. "I have never seen this before in my life. I do not even know whose house that is." "It is Barbara Kensington's property." "Of course it was." "Detective, I have never plowed Barbara's driveway or been on her property at all. She is not one of my clients, and I have no reason to drive through her yard." Patricia jumped in. "Detective, my client has been documenting his routes carefully. Do you have a date and time for when this alleged damage occurred?" "Miss Kensington claims it happened 3 days ago, between 4 and 6 in the morning." "I can prove I was not in that neighborhood at that time," I said. "I have GPS tracking on my truck for insurance purposes. I can pull up exactly where I was." That seemed to give Russo pause. "You have GPS records." "Every vehicle in my fleet has it. It is required by my insurance company." I pulled up my tracking app on my phone and showed him my route from 3 days ago. At 4 in the morning, I had been clear across town plowing a commercial lot near the airport. I did not enter Riverside Meadows until after 7, and I had stayed on the streets, never driving onto anyone's lawn. Russo examined the records carefully. "Can you send me these logs?" "Absolutely." Patricia leaned forward. "Detective, it seems pretty clear that my client is being harassed by Miss Kensington. This is at least the 3rd false complaint she has filed. I think you should consider whether she is misusing police resources." "I will look into it," Russo said, though he did not sound thrilled about the prospect. After we left the station, Patricia turned to me. "She is getting desperate. False police reports are a crime. If we can prove she faked those photos or lied about when the damage occurred, she could face charges." "How do we prove that?" "We need to find out whose tire tracks those actually are, or prove that the damage existed before she claimed it happened." That gave me an idea. "I wonder if any of her neighbors have security cameras." The next day, I went back to Riverside Meadows and talked to some of the residents who lived near Barbara. One of them, an engineer named David Park, had a Ring doorbell that covered part of his driveway and the street in front of Barbara's house. "I have been having issues with Barbara too," David said. "She tried to find me because my exterior paint color was not on the approved list, even though I painted it before she became president, and the previous board okayed it. Would you be willing to check your security footage from 3 days ago?" "Sure. What am I looking for?" "Tire tracks on Barbara's lawn. She is claiming I drove across her property and damaged it." David pulled up his footage and we watched together. At 4 in the morning, there was nothing, just snow falling on an empty street. At 5, still nothing. But at 6:15, right around sunrise, a white pickup truck that was definitely not mine pulled into Barbara's driveway. A man got out and walked around the property, seemingly looking at something. Then he got back in his truck and drove away, cutting across the corner of the lawn as he left and leaving deep ruts in the snow-covered grass. "Who is that?" I asked. David zoomed in on the license plate and squinted. "I cannot make it out, but I think I know that truck. There is a guy who has been doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. I think his name is Frank something. He did some work on Barbara's fence a few months ago. Can you send me this footage?" "Absolutely." I forwarded the video to Detective Russo and Patricia Stone. Within an hour, Patricia called me back, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "This is huge, Yannick. She filed a false police report and tried to blame you for damage that someone else caused. That is a misdemeanor at minimum, possibly a felony depending on her intent." "So what happens now?" "Now we let the police do their job, but I think you should also consider filing a civil lawsuit for defamation and harassment. You have lost income because of her actions and you can document damages. I do not want to drag this out forever. You might not have to." Once Barbara realizes she is facing criminal charges, she might be willing to settle. At minimum, you could get compensation for your lost income and legal fees. The next week was a whirlwind. Detective Russo interviewed the guy with the white truck, a handyman named Frank Doyle, who admitted he had accidentally driven across Barbara's lawn while leaving after checking on some fence repairs. He had told Barbara about it right away, but instead of dealing with it properly, she had apparently seen an opportunity to frame me. Russo brought Barbara in for questioning, and according to Greg Patterson, who heard it from another board member, she initially denied everything. But when confronted with David Park's security footage, she broke down and admitted she had known the damage was not from my truck. She claimed She was just trying to make a point about commercial vehicles in the subdivision. The county prosecutor charged her with filing a false police report, which was a misdemeanor carrying up to 93 days in jail and a $500 fine. Barbara hired an expensive lawyer and tried to fight it, but with the video evidence and her own admission, she eventually took a plea deal. She got probation, a fine, and had to issue a written apology to me. More importantly, the Riverside Meadows HOA board voted unanimously to remove her as president. They also passed new bylaws limiting the president's authority and requiring board votes for any major decisions. Several residents, including Jennifer Walsh and Greg Patterson, filed formal complaints with the county about Barbara's previous behavior, and there was talk of a larger investigation into whether she had engaged in fraud or corruption with her vendor contracts. My business slowly recovered. Most of my former clients came back once the threat of fines disappeared, and I picked up several new clients who had heard about the situation and wanted to support me. The article in the Record Eagle had given me publicity I could not have bought, and my phone was ringing with new inquiries. But the biggest development came a month later when the county administrator called to tell me I had won the bid for the Rural Road snow removal contract. It was a 3-year deal worth about $75,000 annually, guaranteed income that would let me expand my business and hire additional drivers. Your reputation helped a lot, the administrator told me. Sheriff Davidson spoke highly of you, and several board members mentioned the situation with the HOA. They were impressed by how you handled it professionally instead of escalating. I finished out the winter season stronger than I had started it, and by the time spring came, I had hired 2 additional employees and purchased another plow truck. The Riverside Meadows situation had transformed from a crisis into an opportunity. In early March, I ran into Robert Chen at a local hardware store. He was buying mulch, getting ready for his garden. "Yannick," he called out, "I have been meaning to call you." "Hey, Robert, how are things in the neighborhood?" "Much better. We have got a new HOA president, Jennifer Walsh. She actually listens to people, imagine that. And get this, Barbara moved out last month, sold her house and left town." "Really?" "Yeah, apparently she could not handle the shame of everything that happened. Her probation officer and her criminal record made it kind of hard to maintain her image as a pillar of the community." "I almost feel bad for her." Robert laughed. "Do not. She brought it on herself. You know what the final straw was?" The county investigation found she had been taking kickbacks from 3 different vendors, not just snow removal. She had worked out deals with a lawn care company, a pressure washing service, and a house painting contractor. They were paying her under the table to be the preferred providers, and she was threatening residents who did not use them. The total was over $15,000. Are they charging her with that too? That is a civil matter, so the HOA is suing her to recover the money. But yeah, she is in serious legal trouble. Could not happen to a nicer person. As I drove home that day, I thought about how the whole situation had played out. It had started with Barbara making what she probably thought was a simple power play, trying to push out an independent contractor so she could install her own preferred vendor. She had not counted on running into someone who had the resources and connections to fight back, or on her own residents turning against her. The truth was, if I had not had that contract with the sheriff's department, things might have gone very differently. That relationship had given me credibility, advice, and connections that I would not have had otherwise. It had also taught me the value of building genuine relationships in the community rather than just transactions. My business continued to grow over the following months. The county road contract led to more opportunities. including a deal to plow several school parking lots and a municipal building in Kingsley. I was able to buy better equipment, offer better pay to my employees, and even start thinking about expanding into other services like salting and landscaping. But I never forgot the lessons from the Barbara situation. I made sure all my contracts were ironclad. I documented everything meticulously. I maintained my relationships with local officials and law enforcement. And whenever I hired someone new, I told them the story as a cautionary tale about the importance of professionalism and persistence. About a year after everything went down, I got an unexpected call from Patricia Stone, the lawyer who had helped me navigate the HOA dispute. "Yannick, I have got a potential client who is dealing with a similar situation in a different subdivision. HOA president trying to control which contractors residents can use. Would you be willing to talk to them about your experience?" Of course. That conversation led to me becoming something of an informal consultant on HOA issues for small business owners in the area. I did not charge for my time because I remembered how stressful and confusing the whole situation had been for me. I figured if I could help someone else avoid the same pitfalls, it was worth a few hours here and there. The guy Patricia connected me with was a lawn care operator named Carlos Martinez, who was having trouble with the Bayview Estates HOA. Their president, a woman named Karen Whitmore, was trying to force residents to use an approved lawn service that charged nearly twice what Carlos did. I shared my story with him, including the part about documenting everything and building relationships with county officials. I also suggested he check whether the approved vendor had any connection to the HOA president, which turned out to be prescient. Karen's husband owned the approved lawn service. Carlos ended up fighting back, and with the right documentation and a well-timed news article, the HOA backed down. He sent me a case of beer as a thank you, which I appreciated, though I told him it was not necessary. These experiences made me think about the broader issue of HOA overreach. Michigan had relatively strong property rights protections compared to some states, but HOAs still wielded significant power, especially in newer subdivisions where the bylaws were more restrictive. There were stories of people being fined for having the wrong color curtains or planting unauthorized flowers in their own gardens. I started paying more attention to local politics, and even attended a few county commission meetings where HOA regulations were discussed. I learned that Michigan law required HOAs to follow certain procedures and gave homeowners various rights, but enforcement was spotty because most people did not know their rights or could not afford lawyers to defend them. At one meeting, I spoke during the public comment period about my experience with Barbara and the Riverside Meadows HOA. I suggested that the county should create better oversight mechanisms and make information about homeowner rights more readily available. A few commissioners seemed interested, and one of them, a woman named Margaret Foster, asked me to submit a written proposal. I worked with Patricia Stone to draft a document outlining potential reforms, including mandatory training for HOA board members, a county ombudsman to handle complaints, and stricter penalties for board members who abuse their authority. I did not expect much to come of it, but to my surprise, the commission formed a task force to study HOA issues in Grand Traverse County. They invited me to participate as a community member, along with HOA board members, attorneys, and other stakeholders. The task force met monthly for about 6 months, and the discussions were fascinating. Some HOA board members genuinely wanted to do right by their communities, but did not understand the legal limits of their authority. Others were defensive, and insisted that strong HOA enforcement was necessary to maintain property values. We eventually produced a set of recommendations that the County Commission adopted. They included creating an HOA resource center with information about Michigan law, establishing a dispute resolution process that could help avoid costly litigation, and requiring HOA boards to undergo basic training on their legal responsibilities. It was not a perfect solution, but it was progress, and it felt good to turn a negative experience into something that might help other people. Meanwhile, my business continued to thrive. By the end of my second year with the county road contract, I had expanded to 5 trucks and 8 employees. I was doing snow removal in the winter, landscaping in the summer, and general property maintenance year-round. The company that had started with just me and a used plow truck was becoming a real enterprise. Robert Chen joked that I should thank Barbara for inadvertently launching my success. There was some truth to that. Her harassment had forced me to professionalize my operations, document everything, and build stronger relationships throughout the community. The publicity from fighting back had raised my profile and attracted new clients. And the whole experience had given me insights into small business challenges that I might not have developed otherwise. I did eventually cross paths with Barbara one more time, about 2 years after she moved away. I was at a restaurant in Sutton's Bay, a small town north of Traverse City, having dinner with some friends. She was there with someone I assumed was her husband, and we made eye contact across the room. For a moment, I thought she might cause a scene or simply ignore me. Instead, she got up and walked over to my table. "Yannick Morrison," she said quietly, "Barbara, I just wanted to say I am sorry for everything that happened. I was in a bad place mentally, and I took it out on you and a lot of other people. It was wrong." I was genuinely surprised. "I appreciate that. For what it is worth, what happened taught me a lot about myself. I have been in therapy, working on my control issues and my need to micromanage everything. I am trying to be better." "That is good to hear. Anyway, I will let you get back to your dinner." I just wanted to say that. She returned to her table, and we did not speak again. My friends wanted to know who she was and what that was about, so I gave them the abbreviated version of the story. "That must have felt satisfying," one of them said, "having her apologize like that." It did, but not in the way I expected. I did not feel triumphant or vindicated. I just felt glad that the whole situation was finally, completely over, and that maybe she had learned something from it. Looking back now, 4 years after the initial confrontation, I can see how much that situation shaped my life and my business. Morrison Property Services, as I eventually renamed the company, is now one of the larger independent contractors in Grand Traverse County. We handle snow removal, landscaping, property maintenance, and even some light construction work. I employ 14 people full-time and another 6 seasonally. More importantly, I have tried to build the kind of company I would want to work with as a client. We are responsive, professional, and we treat people with respect. We do not cut corners, we carry comprehensive insurance, and we stand behind our work. And we do not tolerate any kind of harassment or bullying, whether from HOAs or anyone else. I still have my contract with the Sheriff's Department, and Sheriff Davidson has become a good friend. We grab coffee occasionally, and he likes to tell people that he knew I would make it big eventually. I am not sure about big, but I am proud of what we have built. The Riverside Meadows subdivision is still there, of course, and I still have clients in the neighborhood. Jennifer Walsh served as HOA president for 2 years and did a great job of bringing stability and common sense to the board. She has since stepped down, but the culture she established continues. The HOA is now seen as a resource for the community rather than an enforcement agency, and most residents seem happy with that arrangement. I occasionally get calls from other business owners facing similar situations with overreaching HOAs. I always make time to talk with them and share what I learned. Sometimes I can help them avoid legal trouble, and other times I just provide moral support. Either way, I figure it is the least I can do. One of the most rewarding aspects of the whole experience has been the relationships I have built. People like Robert Chen, Jennifer Walsh, and Greg Patterson have become real friends, not just clients. We have barbecues in the summer, go out to dinner occasionally, and generally look out for each other. That sense of community is something I never expected when I started a snowplow business, but it has turned out to be one of the best parts. I also learned that standing up for yourself, even when it is scary and uncertain, is almost always worth it. There were moments during the conflict with Barbara when I wondered if I should just walk away and find clients elsewhere. It would have been easier in the short term. But fighting back, documenting everything, and refusing to be bullied led to better outcomes than I could have imagined. The criminal charges against Barbara were eventually resolved with her completing probation and paying restitution to the HOA for the kickbacks she had received. She never returned to Traverse City, and from what I heard through the grapevine, she moved to Florida and stayed out of community politics. I genuinely hope she found peace and was able to work through whatever drove her to behave the way she did. As for me, I am just grateful for how everything worked out. My business is strong, I have great employees and clients, and I am part of a community that values fairness and common sense. The HOA situation that seemed like such a disaster at the time ended up being one of the best things that could have happened to my career. On snowy mornings now, when I am out at 4:30 plowing parking lots and driveways, I sometimes think about that first confrontation with the police officer in Riverside Meadows. If someone had told me then that it would lead to criminal charges against an HOA president, a countywide task force on HOA reform, and a thriving business with 14 employees, I would not have believed them. But that is exactly what happened. And while I would not want to go through that stress again, I would not change anything about how it played out. It taught me about resilience, about the importance of documentation and preparation, and about the value of relationships built on trust and respect. My advice to anyone facing a similar situation is simple. Know your rights, document everything, build relationships with people in positions of authority, and do not back down when you are in the right. It is not always easy, and it does not always work out, but more often than not, standing up to bullies is worth the fight. The situation with Barbara and the Riverside Meadows HOA could have destroyed my business. Instead, it became the foundation for something bigger and better than I had originally envisioned. Sometimes the obstacles we face are not just challenges to overcome but opportunities to grow in ways we never expected. And that is the real lesson I took away from the whole experience. When someone tries to push you down, whether it is an overreaching HOA president or any other kind of bully, the way you respond matters more than the initial attack. You can let it defeat you, or you can use it as motivation to become stronger, smarter, and more successful. I chose the latter, and it made all the difference.